Need coffee. Get turned on. Sorry for being a little bit late. We got some audio issues that happened this morning. Next level stabilization. Genus Brewing. There we go. And I see that we're live. That's a good sign. Morning, Matt. All right. Let's see how close I have to get. We made it to another live stream. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Genus Brewing live stream. This is a live stream that we do every single Sunday morning without fail. No exceptions. We're always here. And if you haven't seen a live stream before, the format is basically we start off with some Genus Brewing news, some stuff that we're doing, or some general beer news, things that might be going on in the tap room. Then we jump into a beer of the week, and then we talk about either one or two topics before going into a question and answer period. Today we're talking about some fun yeast that you might think about going into your winter seasonal holiday brewing time. But yeah, let's jump into some Genus news first.
Genus news. All right. Now what do we got going on? We got a new video up about making some Applejack in the home, making it in a more traditional way of ice distilling yourself or icing cider rather than just starting out with something that's heavily alcoholic like Everclear and blending it back.
That one is pretty fun. Not our typical beer-themed stuff, but we have an ice maker that we got from New Air, and so and freeze distilling is something that we've done before and like to do. So it was a fun video to put out. Hopefully, you guys go watch it.
And it's actually pretty awesome. I mean, you know, I would have that ice machine just to do things like that. Alcoholic slushies are great.
Yeah, and you get cool, flavorful ice out of it too.
Hey, Matt, thanks for making fun of me. I had oral surgery a few days ago, so my mouth's still pretty raw. But thanks, buddy. I'm just kidding.
Super awake.
Yeah.
I'm actually probably just as awake.
I will say, if I'm a little bit muddled or less interactive, it is because I have a giant hole in my face now, and it hurts.
Yeah, less fun hole than normal.
Yeah.
We filmed a new series that will be probably published either later this week or early the following week. It's called Brew Noobs, and so that is one where our taproom minions who don't have the commercial brewing experience attempt to make a beer based on their own whims, and we basically do a grain of glass with that, and then Tim and I drink it and comment on it and add some advice of what we might have done differently. And so far, that video looks really good. So be excited for that.
Definitely entertaining. A little bit different, not seeing our faces in it. You know, maybe extra engagement. I mean, we did purposely pick our two sexiest employees beyond ourselves.
Yeah. So they're number 3 and 4 overall in the taproom environment.
Yeah.
We also have the Ask Corbs video that I promised like 4 months ago. Pretty much clipped and ready to go. We're probably going to add some text overlay stuff. Or we'll just keep it from you and never publish it ever.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Also, we blame that one on Ryan. Because, you know, he definitely should have finished it, but he just didn't.
That's true. Ryan
it's
disappeared.
Ryan's fault. 100%. Super exciting. If you are in the area, come on down. We have a bourbon barrel-aged version of our Reese's Puff Porter. Still the same collab we do with Natural 20. Just last year, he bought a whole bunch of bourbon barrel, he being Reese down at Natural 20, bought a whole bunch of barrels. So we got a great idea that what if we made an 11% version of Reese's Puff Porter and shoved it in one of those and waited a year. So we did.
And it's super tasty. So that's on tap in the tap room, which is going to be really fun. And, that's a nice wintry-ish style of beer. So I think that's going to be a good segue into our Beer of the Week. Bum, 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 Beer of the Week. Yeah.
Woo.
which is gonna be winter seasonal beers. We're talking about winter seasonal. I mean, and we're getting there. It's not super winter looking outside, but we got some cold mornings.
It's getting into the season for it. There's a couple being released around the area. They're super fun beers, and actually, this is kind of the style that I had in my mind this morning. And winter seasonal beers, this is in the, specialty category. So it's kind of a catch-all. There's a whole lot that can go on inside of these styles.
Yeah, I think it's under spiced beer. I think that's a whole category by itself. I didn't pay too much attention.
Yeah, spiced beer.
Something like that.
Actually. It is, yeah.
But winter beers, the way I think of them, they've got a really, really broad flavor range. They have some sort of thickness and sweetness and booziness, but they have some brightness that comes with spices. Kind of everything you expect in like a cup of hot cocoa, mulling wine, something like that.
Mulling wine, like glue wine, or something like that. It's a beer, no matter its color, intensity, or anything like that. It's something that keeps you warm on a very cold day, or you want to go back to, you've been playing in the snow all day, chucking your kids in snowbanks, hoping, they can't find their way out. I mean, if it was me, I just dug tunnels under there.
Right.
You're on the mountain skiing or anything like that, and these beers should be very refreshing, but also at the same time big and warming. It's kind of a contradictory ideas going on in this.
But that makes them even more fun to make. When I typically think of a winter beer style base, I usually end up in that like amber range, but thicker. I think it's just some of the earlier ones that I tasted were like Deschutes used to have
Jubilee.
Jubilee is always really good. They also used to do a hop in the dark thing with like a winter ale with spruce. It was like a black IPA that had some spruce in it or something like that.
That was really Pyramid does the Snow Cap, which is a spruce beer, black spruce beer in that. Also, Deschutes, bring back Jubilee and then send us a case.
Super Jubilee.
Yeah. Like, please, for the love of God, please do that.
They are super tasty. I used to stock up on those.
Yeah, I've also seen some of these winter seasonal beers be light beers, like a traditional wassail. That is definitely a winter beer. The spices are coming from yeast more so than, actual spices going in. But you can have something that light too.
Yeah, but they're a good platform to be able to put spices on top of, but you don't necessarily have to, depending on how you fermentease it.
Yes, Reverend, you are 100% right. Black IPA is an oxymoron. You can't have a black pale ale. That doesn't make sense. So
you're an oxymoron.
The proper term for it would be Cascadian Dark Ale, because, here in Cascadia, we invented hoppiness. That's just how history goes.
That is how, we did invent hops. Mm-hmm. They did not exist before Washington State.
No. Well, I'll throw Cascadia in there, Yeah. Oregon does a pretty decent job with it. Idaho gets lumped in because they're just close by, and we like to cross the border for cheap stuff.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit more about the winter seasonals, though. So, according to the BJCP style guidelines, they are beers that suggest cold weather and Christmas holiday season, and can include some spices, some specialty sugars. And so specialty sugars, a lot of times brown sugar is really common. Molasses, if you're doing the ginger snap kind of flavors. Yeah, pretty much any specialty sugars that are
maple. I would throw maple in there too.
They add warmth and depth of character, but also make it boozy. Other products are reminiscent of mulling spices, like we mentioned. I don't know if you've had mulled wine before, but it's a super fun holiday beverage. You get a crock pot, pour some medium quality wine in there, and pour some sugar and mulling spices, and call it a dia.
It's delicious. Or glue wine, or Glue Creek. If you're in the Portland area and you haven't before, you need to go to a Cascade Barrel House and get their Glue Creek right now. It is warm spiced cherry sour beer and absolutely phenomenal and incredible, and more people need to do warm beer. Honestly.
Get yourself some, buy an extra 2, ship them up here, and then we'll be best friends.
With heat packs.
Yes.
Oh, that hurt. Yeah, and in all honesty, kind of going into this, I know we're kind of hitting a lot on spices and things like that. You don't always need to go heavy on spices to make these beers come across as very wintry. Talking about Natural 20, they actually have two really good kind of winter beers that fit right into this. And that's going to be their Witch Hunt, it is a spiced cranberry brown beer. It's a cranberry brown. I mean, just everything about that makes me think cranberry sauce.
Cranberries that's another good fun one for Christmassy-ness without necessarily having to add spices.
Yeah. What's more winter than cranberry? At least for me.
Pleasant tartness. It goes good in beer. Take out some of the hops, add some crannies.
Yeah. And then the second one, to actually take this into a different, I know that's not how they intended it, but their beer called Serious Gourmet Shit, which is a white, not white chocolate.
White stout.
White stout. It is a white stout. I think it's a caramel white stout, white chocolate caramel stout. I don't know. Matt, look that up.
White stout, yeah.
Weiser, put it in there. Anyway,
it's a serious gourmet shit.
I think it's a caramel macchiato white stout is what I think it actually is. But when you drink that beer, it is a little bit lighter, but everything about it is just like, yeah, I need some snow on the ground to drink this beer properly. And that's, to me, that's kind of a winter seasonal beer when it makes you think, I need it to be cold out right now, and this would make this beer so much better.
It's kind of the fun of it being a broad category. If it reminds you of Christmas, then it's going to be good. And I've actually had some really big sweet variations of a winter warmer, and I've had some really fun piney, like, hey, we're adding spruce or we're adding actual evergreen tips or something like that into the beer to bump up the pininess of the hops. So there's a lot you can go with it.
Yeah. Oh, Weiser came back in there. It is a caramel macchiato white stout. Yeah. He started up a coffee beer project before all the COVID shutdowns, and that was one of them. And, good job inspiring that one, because that's a very delicious beer, and I enjoy it. Go drink some at Nat 20.
All coffee beers are a copy of us. We invented white stouts.
That is, in the Spokane area. And, greater United States.
And the entire world.
No
one had heard of them before we did it.
Before us. That was...
Appearance, it says general medium amber to very dark brown. Darker versions are more common. Usually clear, although darker versions may be virtually opaque. Some chill haze is acceptable. Generally has a well-formed head. And is often off-white to tan. So it's trying to say that you're not going pure stout. You maybe have a little caramel malts are appropriate-ish, but overall it's being very broad in appearance. There can be very light and very dark versions.
Yeah, I would also say in here that off-white to tan head in there. I see most of them actually being very closer to off-white. Like Peter said, you're not going full stout most of the time. You're not going full roast on that most of the time, even though that is quite appropriate.
If you go roast, you got to have some sweetness in the body to kind of back up the roast, because there's still got to be some platform there for if you add some spices.
Well, like coming up, our Mexican hot chocolate stout, I think is going to be a great winter seasonal beer. I would probably still stick that in the stout category because it's super roasty, but if we had dropped out the roast on that, made it more of a Schwarzbier or over the top, that could easily go into the winter seasonal beer.
Yeah. Aroma, a wide range of aromatic possibilities like we talked about. Mulling spices, gingerbread, Christmassiness, evergreen, maple syrup, lots of different stuff you can do. Alcohol aromas are usually common. They're not necessary, but the alcohol aromas are going to come from those simple sugars you're adding. So for me, the easiest one is just brown sugar. You get a little bit of kind of toffee flavor from the brown sugar, plus it's super, super fermentable. But yeah, there's a lot of fun you can do with invert sugars and all sorts of different stuff.
Brown sugar is just kind of Thanksgiving, Christmas time. I mean, you put brown sugar in everything around there. So that having that little bit of rummy aspect to it is pretty darn good. And in all honesty, also at this time, I think of rum as being kind of a drink, especially spice versions of that. Eggnog eggnog most classically.
Chumbly's in here.
But
bingo can officially start.
Yeah.
What's that one sugar that's like a little brick of something, like a little circular brick? It looks like, you know what I'm talking about? It's really tasty and great in beer.
Dementia? No.
Darmanera? Deberdo. Somebody, what am I thinking about?
Yeah.
Tell me what I'm thinking. Flavor, many interpretations possible, allow for brewer creativity. Here's some options. So on the flavor, you've got caramel, toast, nutty, or chocolate flavors are good. Some include dried fruit. Somebody mentioned what were they? The cranberry IPA that we've got to try. That sounds really good.
Reverend did, which means he has to send it to us now.
It's true.
That you're obligated.
No, coffee Doppelbock from this year's Siren Project barista is well worth a try.
That sounds amazing. And
Yum.
Doppelbock, talk about actually a perfect base to translate into a lot of these good spicy beers is Doppelbock.
Yeah.
In the flavor, as Peter was getting into it, but we kind of got distracted a little bit, is dried fruit flavor. And specifically is coming in here as being fig and date, plum, orange peel, things like that. And the Doppelbock, I mean, is right there, fig and date. Sweet goodness.
Yeah, and some of that can come from some of the more complex sugars that you'll add. There's also some malts that'll do it, like Special B or Special X. And then usually you want a yeast, which we'll talk a little bit about in topic number 1, but a yeast that'll kind of support or add on to those dried fruit flavors.
Yeah, and as we're talking about the dried fruit flavors right now, don't forget about adding actual fruit. Raisins in there would add that great figgy, raisiny character to it, while adding a little more complex sugars, and delicious things can be done from that. Actually adding in some orange peels to it, that's classic in mulling spices, actually. So that's something very good that can be done to kind of help pump some of these flavors out there without going too far.
And one last thing on the flavor, it does mention right at the very end that roast malt characteristics are rare, and if they exist, they're usually not stronger than chocolate flavors or any of the other winter warmery flavors.
Yeah. A couple of other good, that's it. This is not, you can do some good winter beers and stouts, but once you get into that heavy roast, you're in the stout porter category, and it kind of takes it away from these. It takes away from the almost refreshing aspect of these. As while it's in there, and even in here, generally finishes rather full and satisfying. And that's kind of one of those things about it. It's one of those beers that you want to come in, warm up. You can drink it while you're still cold from the outside, but you can also drink it while you're warm on the inside. It's refreshing after you've gotten off the mountain, but it's filling when you're sitting by the campfire type of thing.
Yeah. Although if it's super, super snowy outside, you're probably sitting by an indoor fire.
Yeah.
Chestnuts roasting. Adam added some rum-soaked apricots and dried figs. That sounds delightful.
Yeah, that's, again, kind of getting that rummy note. I think rum is just, it's one of those flavors that's beautiful at Christmas time, and it also absorbs into the spice characteristics really well.
Yeah, the rum, it sounds really good in beers. You got your beer, you got your hot buttered rum, you drink them together. You've got
hot buttered rum.
Make a butter beer and some hot buttered rum.
Hot buttered rum white stout.
Yeah, we can do that. We've got all the rum stuff.
We got all the rum stuff.
Mouthfeel. Wide range of interpretations are possible. Body is generally medium to full. You want that thickness in your mouth, if you know what I'm saying. Chewiness is often present, so it can actually be full. I've seen some bigger versions of these finish up in like the 1030, 1035 final gravity.
Super Jubilee.
Yeah. Those are some thick boys. Yeah, it's same kind of concept as all the Fremont barrel age projects.
Yeah.
You start them really, really, really thick. That way they finish thick.
Exactly. And going into this a little bit, the certain malt chewiness, the body medium to full. I also want to throw in there that while the body can be medium to full, you can still have a very dry beer along the same lines as Bière de Garde, which actually is another great beer as a base for this, where you have that low sugar content to it, but you still have a really nice big full body to it.
Yeah.
And some of that can come from invert sugar, some of it can come from specific yeast or other things you add to it.
Has anyone thought of my sugar that I was thinking of yet?
Not yet.
It's in a little circular brick, and it looks like kind of toffee-y orange, but kind of crumbly, but also in a pack thing.
Weiser, look it up.
Go Weiser.
Go Matthew Weiser.
Mighty Morphin Matthew Weiser. Overall balance is key to presenting a well-made winter seasonal beer. Like we talked about before, the special ingredients should complement the base beer, but not overwhelm it. That's like when you're why we said when you're adding those spices, that brighter spice note, you got to have some body and thickness because it ain't going to work on a dry, clean beer. Now, the brewer should recognize that some combinations of base beer styles and special ingredients will work well, and others do not. Alan Newmeyer, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. The base beer is a classic style. And whenever you add herbs and additional ferment, this is a very long section.
Yeah,
you guys get the picture.
Well, it's
trying
trying
to make some compliments.
It's describing it very well. That if you're trying to do a classic style that's spiced, make sure that style shines through. It should be a great base beer to start out with.
Yeah.
Also, pick things that work together. You know, if you're doing those classic mulling spices on it, maybe doing an extremely light, grainy, and a little bit hoppy beer for this is not the right way to go. Although it could be.
By the way, Jubilee Ale is probably my favorite. It's winter seasonals. They have a special place in my heart. Like when I first got into craft beer as a fledgling 21-year-old, and winter seasonals rolled around, that was always like my favorite time to go to the store and like find all the new ones.
Yeah.
Honestly, some
Wassail,
some Celebrator, some Jubilee Ale.
I mean,
Jubilee is really good.
Jubilee Ale is really good.
Yeah.
It just is. It's a great, even without being spiced or anything like that, that is, I mean, Deschutes hits it out of the park almost every single time. And that is kind of your perfect base
I think that's
beer.
it. Pilon Chilo?
Maybe.
That sounds right.
I mean, it could just also be the way that they process it and package it.
Yeah.
It could be brown sugar that's just shoved in a disc.
Maybe.
More raw. I don't know. You know, and again, you should be tasting, things shouldn't be muddled. I know we're saying adding mulling spices, things like that, but it shouldn't be a muddled flavor in there. You shouldn't go, oh yeah, there's a whole spice cupboard.
All of my spices. I got my cinnamons and my 4 pounds of cloves.
You know, bring it into balance, make it a super delicious beer in that, as always.
Thoughts on the Fremont Bee Bombs? When they first come out, they are too sweet, in my mind.
Yes.
But if you let them sit for 2-3 years, then they turn out pretty good.
I'm gonna come back to that because that's a great comment for some of these beers. I like the Bee Bomb not as much as the KDS, and I know that's the OG. It's Kentucky Dark Star. You cannot convince me different. KDS is on the label still. I know I'm not legally able to say that. Well, they aren't, but it's KDS. I prefer those a little bit better most of the time just because they aren't quite as sweet as the Bee Bomb. But if you give them the age, those beers are perfect. Those beers are not meant to be drank fresh. For everybody drinking Fremont barrel-aged beers right away when you get them, you're being a fool. And I know they're delicious, but sit on them. These beers are meant to sit.
I think they get really popular because people drink them fresh, and the majority of people across the world just have sweet palates.
Yeah.
They're wrong, but a lot of people have sweet palates.
Well, they're amazingly delicious fresh. They really are. They really are. But to get the true flavor, wait on it.
Yeah, you
well,
gotta
it's
sit
like
on it.
Rusty Nail. People go nuts over Rusty Nail. You know, that's like the most popular sought-after beer in Washington. I just read a thing. As far as okay, don't come after because Chuckanut's the most popular. Dude, Chuckanut just won like another 7 medals at the Washington Beer Awards.
Nice.
Like insane. Those guys are incredible. But
They make some semi-decent beer.
Rusty Nail. Everybody goes nuts over the Rusty Nail, and I just cannot get into that beer. I've aged some out 5 years. I've drank them fresh. It's too much. It's too sweet. The cinnamon's out of balance for me. I love what they're doing with it, but it's got to be the KDS.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any other new things, combinations, photo occurred? Ooh, molasses.
Sorry. I'm interrupting you, but I was going to talk about this too. This is in the comments in there. A lot of these winter beers can be significantly aged, but you're also looking to hit a sweet point in there.
Sweet.
Not sweetness, but a sweet spot. You're looking for the good spot, just about 2 inches in and up. Where you're dropping off a lot of the big harsh flavors, but you're not quite going into well aged yet. Some of the bigger versions, of course, you're starting to hit beyond 8%. You can age them for over a year. They're still going to taste pretty good. But this is a beer that should almost be brewed in August for you to drink in November and December, to get all these flavors to come together really well and give it a little bit of aged character, but not exactly full aging. Would be my comment on this.
Reverend KY's got a quarter barrel of 2019 Kentucky Breakfast Stout chilling in his garage. That sounds dope. I had a sixtel of that not too long ago.
Yeah.
I think it disappeared magically.
I did not see Kentucky Breakfast Stout. And, I mean, Reverend, Kentucky Breakfast Stout is amazing. Canadian Breakfast Stout is better. And
because syrup and Pendleton.
And maple. And Kentucky Dark Star is better. Fremont makes the better coffee chocolate beer.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm more partial to Founders.
I love Founders. And Kentucky Breakfast Stout, honestly, I mean, that's one of the beers that's in my heart. You can find it everywhere. That's always in my fridge. I, in fact, always keep a little bit aging.
Yep.
But the Coffee Dark Star, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's the barrel-aged beer that got me into dark coffee barrel-aged beers. It's in my heart. I can't.
Tell us how to brew in August here in November. Not all winter beers have to be aged, although if you're trying to get a perfect Christmas beer, you probably should get started pretty quick here.
I kind of say that because spices are big, sharp flavors in there. Generally, these beers are higher in alcohol.
It's going to take a little bit to mellow them out.
Yeah, you need some mellow in them pretty much. So, 3 months might be a little excessive, and it's not. 3 months is not excessive. Neither is 6 on there, depending on what you make. And if you make it well enough, you can make a very fresh winter warmer in there. I call them winter warmers, without going too heavy into the aging or things like that. It's not something necessary. It's just, something I like to throw out there to think about. Like, when you're making fest beer, you should be making it in June or earlier.
For a festival in October.
It needs a while to age to be better. That doesn't mean that it's still not pretty good when it comes out fresher, but if you can get everything to meld together a little bit better, it's usually better on there.
Or you can be lazy like us and just make it 6 days before. You can use Lutra.
Yeah, that is also true.
Speaking of yeast, let's go on to our topic number 1. So topic number 1, which we're probably only going to have the one before going into Q&As. But topic number 1 is using a yeast selection. Do you know have one?
I didn't get that. I don't think it printed off. Our printer hates us. Maybe. I don't know. Also, Jubilee. Yeah, the Skookum Barrel Aged Breakfast Stout was pretty darn good. That was a good beer. Well, that was delicious. You should send us more.
So for winter seasonals or people trying to make spice beers, I commonly see, obviously people use SO5 because they use SO5 for everything, but SO4 is probably the other most commonly used yeast. Any variation of that's house, it's British ale, which is semi-malt leaning. But other than that, doesn't offer a ton of characters other than just kind of leaning into the maltiness or the sugariness of the beer. But there's actually some other fun ways to kind of play around with yeast selection, including a couple that I'll mention a little bit down the road. And using your yeast selection to create some of either the spice phenolics or some extra fruitiness that'll really lean into your dried fruit kind of notes or some of your other fruitinesses.
Yeah,
without going big and Englishy.
And
see if I can get you a paper.
Oh yeah. I will also say on this, this is one of the tricks that I use a lot to enhance flavors for it. If you're going to go for kind of a nice mulling spice beer in there, using something that produces those high phenolics, the good clove, the good banana-like flavor is going to be awesome. If you're doing something that has a lot of those rummy and fruity flavors, getting a yeast that's going to produce maybe a little bit of the fruity flavors, say from a German strain, or even the bubblegum flavors from a Belgian strain is awesome. Reverend KY is on here. Marzen equals March. Yes, it does. There's a reason it's called March, is because you make it in March and you wait till October to drink it. Thank you, Reverend. Bring that up. That's a good point because people need to. So, while Peter is getting back into this, yeast is an awesome way to get flavor out of it without going too heavy on spices, sugars, and other flavorings. Don't feel stuck. Just because you're making a classic Doppelbock style in there doesn't mean you couldn't use something like the Weinstefaner strain, which at higher temperatures gets a little bit of banana on there. And then you mix in your mulling spices and your other spices, and here you go. You're getting a lot more. Sorry, Peter's distracting me because, you should smash the like button. And there you go. You're getting a little bit more of those flavors coming out of there. You're still getting a really good German beer coming through there, and it complements each other very well. I'm stalling for time while he's going on there. Let's answer a couple of questions. Reverend, would Saison years work? Depending on how long you let it sit and if the beer could last up to years, probably. But Saison yeast, yes. Saison yeast would work for specific things and what you're trying to do, but maybe not for everything in that. So Saison yeast, known to be very high peppery and a little bit funky. So if you're coming across that, instead of doing, some of the mulling spices with it, turn around and then do maybe a spruce beer with it, where that pepper and that spruce are really going to shine through on top of something like a Cascadian Dark. And that's going to be a wonderful winter beer. Dun, 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 dun.
All right, where are we at? What are we talking about?
All right. Now, I'm just kind of loosely going over a few things in there without going
full on
too specific.
Okay.
Reverend asked if Saison years would work.
Saison, so there's a couple fun ways to do Saison. There's Belgian Saison to be that fruitier. The answer is yes, but I probably wouldn't hot ferment it like I do a lot of my Saisons. But if you did Belgian Saison, that's got some of those fruitier notes that are going to lean really well into a big ambery body with those date and fig kind of notes if you got Special B. You definitely want to suppress and make it not too funky though.
Yeah.
I could also see the French Saison that's got the lemony, peppery kind of notes going well with maybe some spruce.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Saison, if you go full Saison on there, maybe not mixing it with the spices, but mix it with spruce. Saison, spruce tips, Cascadian Dark Ale. That could be really delicious.
Adam Chumbly lost $10. Let me know if anybody has seen it. Fell right out of my pocket. We appreciate the $9.99, Adam.
Don't check our pockets.
Yeah.
The French Saison, I like the idea of French Saison being over maybe an amber beer and then throwing that into orange spice, cinnamon, nutmeg, orange peels on there. But like Peter is saying, cooler fermentations probably restrain that character so you can get it, but it's not overwhelmingly funk.
Yeah, well, the French Saison, I'd also say part of the balance there is because it is a diastaticus derivative. It will make a drier beer, and so I'd probably try to find ways to beef up my malt profile, which for me usually just means adding 40% oats. But for other people, they like to mash. I don't like to change my mash temperature.
Caramel.
48 all day.
Caramel pills.
Some caramel pills. That's a good one.
That would be great to add that in there. You get a little bit of caramel, a little by the body.
I could see as a body, I think amber color makes sense, but I can also see something like, remember when Rogue had the Imperial pills that came in the clay bottle?
Oh, yes.
That as a base style?
It wasn't Mormito.
It might have been, yeah.
It might have been Mormito.
Mormito? Something like that. Anyways, that thick.
I might be thinking of Masashi
it was 9 or 10%, but it actually finished at 1014 or 1016, and so it had a nice sweetness behind it. Besides still being Pilsner, I could see if you change the yeast on that one into the French Saison yeast,
that would be beautiful.
Yeah, it'd be super tasty.
Yeah, and think about that French Saison, a little bit restrained, maybe 9-10% on it, and then actually go for the citrus spice. That could be an incredible winter beer.
Yeah.
And French Saison. Also keep in mind that while Belgian Saison is going to go dry and not leave the body, French Saison I like because it does produce bodybuilding chains in there. So even though it's dry, it still feels fuller. And that fullness is, I would say, a pretty important thing in winter warmers.
Putting in the boil or in secondary. Use grain backs, don't clog your chiller. Best time to add spices. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Oh.
You're not saying put pudding in. There's somebody named Pudding. Okay.
Pudding War asked, when is the best time to add spices to the beer? Boil, primary? Depends on what you're trying to do, when to add them. Reverend likes boil or secondary. I'm also on that, not in primary. And one reason I don't like primary is vigorous fermentation will blow off aromatics. The boil will boil off aromatics. It's going through fermentation, which will blow off aromatics as well. So I tend to really like doing it in the secondary. And usually get a softer extraction in the secondary because you're extracting through alcohol and not heat, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the things with doing it in the boil is you run the risk of tannin with certain spices.
Like cinnamon?
Yeah, I'll also say if you added it in primary, there are some spices that'll mess with fermentation. They'll inhibit it a little bit. But the late boil can be good for some spices. I think Thomas, we had a little chat about that one of the times that he was on the live stream with us. And Thomas is kind of like the spice god in Spokane. The herbs and spices.
Herbs and spices.
But there are also some spices that do need a little bit of that boil to get full extraction. I'd say paradise seed is one of those.
Yeah.
Star anise. A little bit of boiling can go a long way in that.
And I would say in star anise, that's actually probably one that you want to blow some aromatics off.
So it doesn't get super powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a
underboard.
And again, there are a few that are a lot. Cinnamon, I don't like cinnamon in the boil because it's so uncontrollable and you can really pull tannins. But I also don't like using cinnamon powder. That is very hard to control. It is very instant and very aggressive.
Yeah. Another thing about cinnamon and anything with like fibrous material and spices, that fibrous material in cinnamon is very, first of all, it can be tannic, but it's also a really huge growth spot for bacteria. So you got to make sure that you are trying to kill that. And my favorite method with cinnamon specifically is to steam it first.
Yeah.
Now we got a question from Ruben Ramirez. Peter, when you mash at 148, do you usually go for 2 hours or just 1 hour? That's complicated because when you brew here, we actually usually do overnight mashes. So a lot of hours. That said, if I'm doing a home brew, I'm probably still going to go for about an hour. Usually, I mean, even at 148, I usually see most of the conversion done within the first 30 minutes. And so I go for an hour just because that's what everyone else does. There are times if I know that I don't have a lot of enzymes or I don't have good recirculation or there are mitigating circumstances that's going to prevent that full conversion from happening rapidly, that I'll go for longer just to be on the safe side. But for the most part, I'm cool with just an hour.
I would say for me, it depends on the beer in there. Anything I'm intending to be hazy is a half an hour. That's all you really need to get most of your conversion out of it. That's all you really need to break down some of the bad proteins, and leaving some of the other proteins in there works great for hazies. That's I mean, not just hazy IPAs or things like that, but beer I want to be hazy. That's where I like it. If I know you don't need to anymore, especially with how well modified our malts are, but generally if I'm doing more of a German beer or a lighter lager, I go for an hour and a half just to get some extra conversions, and because history and tradition tells us it does help prevent some other off flavors coming through. That's meant to be with less modified malts than what we have today, but it's still one of those things that Germans make German beer the best, and I try to do what they do and process when making those beers.
Because they're cool.
Most of the time.
And to have some fun accents.
Oh, yes.
What's that? Reverend KY, thank you so much for the super chat. Jiminy Christmas, your guys' advice is in value. Thank you so much for both of us. I appreciate that.
Yeah. You know, and actually,
I'm just trying to one up Adam.
You are. I mean, literally.
9.99 up to 10.
I'll also say, and somebody just said in here, allspice is crazy intense. And yeah, know what ingredients you're adding in and their intensity levels. That is a huge thing to this. If you're adding something in like cinnamon and allspice that is super tannic, staying away from super tannic grains or restricting your hops a little bit more because you're going to get these flavors coming from the spices. That's something you got to think about.
Yeah.
And then also, like, using some spices you don't think about. We made a spice beer it wasn't a spice beer. It was actually in root beer that I used pickling spices. It's a specific blend of pickling spices from Spiceology. Gonna toot their horn again because it should be. Boo boo.
Oh, that horn.
Yeah, that horn.
Not the human.
Not the human horn. Not the human horn. It was amazing. What they use. I mean, there's clove. There's allspice in there. There's bay leaf. There's a couple others I forget, but it was absolutely amazing and beautiful, and added just a different aspect to it, a different little spice aspect. So definitely play around with a lot of these. You don't have to stick to the classic cinnamon, nutmeg, clove.
Actually, you should probably just take all your cloves and throw them away.
I enjoy whole cloves in a very restrained manner.
Like 2 whole cloves and then just kind of wave them over the top of your fermenter.
We had actually a cocktail at Spencer's where we put like 2 whole cloves
and
on top of it. It wasn't an orange.
I used to do a pumpkin cocktail.
Ooh.
It was in a goblet, and then I would put a slice of orange, a cross section of orange, and stuff it with cloves. The whole thing looked like a pumpkin because of the orange.
That was sexy.
I'd put a little, I forget, a mint leaf or something like that into the orange as like the little stem of the pumpkin.
Yeah, but just having that aromatics of the clove in the drink just completely changed it. You didn't really taste it, but you could smell it, and it was so good.
Speaking of clove, let's talk about some yeast that produce a compound called 4-vinyl guaiacol.
Topic number 1.
Yeah, 4-vinyl guaiacol is often thought to be a little bit off-putting or a little bit too pungent or strong in beers. However, in spice beers, when you got a lot of other stuff going in, they can be welcome. So we can talk about BananaClove yeast, which is going to be your Hefeweizen strains. A lot of those will have both banana and clove, and if you ferment them just a little bit north of 70, you can push that clove a little bit more. And so that is a fun one to kind of play with in winter beers. And I think that it's kind of a fun time when you're adding a bunch of other spices to be able to use it in Hefeweizen. It's the only time you can really use a Hefeweizen yeast in not a wheat beer.
Yeah. Well, and we did last year. Some people will remember our Naruto reference because that's what I get for asking one of our underlings to name a beer.
Yeah.
We called it a winter amber, and all we literally did was just make a classic amber beer and ferment it with
half Hefeweizen yeast.
It wasn't even half. It was Hefeweizen yeast.
It was all Hefeweizen?
It was all Hefeweizen.
We did 2 different ones.
Was it 3470? No,
you did the WBO6. The
WBO6? Yeah, I did do WBO6. It was Wine Stefaner's strain. I know that 100%.
Both of those are. Yeah, both those. You get the lager and the wheat yeast.
We used the wheat yeast. I didn't ferment it all the way hot. I think it stopped at about 68, and the spice profile, it was probably 69. Let's be honest. So it was amazing. It was winter. You drank it and went, this is a winter beer, 100%. And the only thing that we did different besides a traditional amber beer is using the Hefeweizen yeast.
And we marketed it as a winter amber too. It's what we called it, winter amber. And people went nuts for it. Like, it outsold a lot of our beers that we had made previously that I think technically were probably better beers. But
and they were better beers.
It was the right level of spice. It wasn't too much.
It was perfect.
So playing with your yeast can be just as important or more funner than actually physically adding spices. KO Brewing, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And along going, that is something you can create a winter warmer without adding any spices to it. Jubilee is a winter warmer with no spices, and it is amazing.
And Full Sail's wassail.
Yes, that is one of my favorite Full Sail beers.
Yeah.
Phenomenal, and no spicing. It's just through malt and yeast choice. To go along with this, and when we were talking about the Hefeweizen yeast, another great yeast to use for these beers that's widely available and easy to use is the wheat beer strain, wheat beer yeast.
That one goes really good if you're going to add a lot of those mulling spices that have the orange notes to it. And again, can go really good in an amber body. It adds the right level of spice, the right level of freshness to an otherwise, thicker, sweeter body. And it goes great with subtle, not overdone, but subtle spices.
I would say what you should do with wit beer. All right, get maybe a Scottish red or an Irish red. You don't want to go caramely sweet with it. You want a little bit of those toasty notes in there, a lot of that Maillard, a little bit of the dark figgy fruit. So somewhere in that range. Ferment it, not super hot. I'd say 70, 69 or 70. 69 is more fun.
69, 100%.
And then also do your traditional wit beer spices in there. Throw some coriander, throw some grains of paradise, and throw some sweet orange peel. And I say sweet rather than bitter on this for a reason. A little bit of sweet orange peel, and then maybe just dash it with a touch of cardamom or nutmeg.
Ooh.
And that will be a phenomenal winter warmer right there.
Yeah.
I 100% believe it. Maybe if you're getting a little bit of wild, throw some dates or figs in at the very end, or maybe even a caramelized sugar of some sort.
Salad Official, what do you guys think of Yogur and any spice/herb beers? I could see that it'd be tougher. I could also see it going poorly. But my initial thought would be like a brown kind of body.
Oh yeah,
a little bit of nuttiness, and then you add the spices, and you got kind of the funkiness from the Yogur.
Lemon peel in that 100%. I think there's got to be some like spiced lemon is coming to mind. I think I would do lemon, grains of paradise, because I absolutely love those. I love the pepperiness, the citrus pepper that comes off of that. I would probably also do peppercorns, and I'm debating between black or pink.
Pink sounds funner.
It normally is.
Yeah.
I think I would do both, honestly. I think I would love to see that black pepper spice in there, but the fruitiness, the softness of the pink pepper as well. And then lemon. Again, lemon. I think that lemon is going to take it into kind of a spiced lemon cake type of area. Not cake, but spiced lemon area. That could be really good.
Yeah, it'd be fun. So
do it. Send us some.
Winter beers are also a fun time to try to go into, and I don't make a lot of Belgian beers, but winter beers, using a Belgian yeast, especially, again, a little bit on the colder side, the Belgian beers have certain fruitinesses that will definitely push forward dried fruit notes, like those dates and figs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is actually a really good body yeast to play with on top of pretty much any range of body.
Mine, for my winter warmers, what I normally used was Belgian Ardennes yeast, fermented somewhere around 65. I was trying to catch the bubblegum and the fruit from the Ardennes, and it just blends in so well to these beers. It's awesome.
And Ardennes is a lower clove producing, that 4-vinyl guaiacol, lower clove producing of the Belgian ranges of yeast. But all of them, again, clove, when you're adding spices, that clove from yeast production, it can actually work out pretty well. But if you wanted to get rid of it, which there is ways to do, I also think that it'd be really fun to play with the crisper clipped variations of the Belgian, I think it's Belgian Strong Ale and the Hefeweizen strain, by using Omega's Bonanza and Sundew.
Those
would be really fun.
Those could be incredible. I mean, Sundew, both of them have the that gene clipped off, so it doesn't produce the clove flavors, just the fruit flavors coming from it. Sundew is supposed to be very red berry fruit, and that going into almost all of your kind of candy, fruity fig beers will be amazing. The Bonanza is banana, and I mean, it's banana. Make banana bread beer.
Yeah.
Honestly, drink banana bread beer. It's actually really good. Is it from Young's?
Yeah, it's Young's. Yeah, they have the double chocolate and the banana bread, and you're supposed to mix them together.
Both of them are amazing. Double chocolate actually is awesome. I love that beer.
Yeah.
That's another way to actually go into kind of winter warmers that I kind of forgot about, the chocolatiness that's going into it.
Yeah.
The double chocolate beer stout that they have, I don't know necessarily I would classify that as a true stout. It doesn't have a lot of its roastiness in there. I mean, it has those dark characters, but that would be a great winter beer too.
Here's a question from Reverend KY. For secondary additions, would you do a tincture with adding lemon peel? So with lemon peel, I usually don't, or with orange peel, peels that you can wash pretty easily. I actually just like to naturally express the oils. And I don't zest it. I do big peels, but then I'll squeeze them a little bit to express the oils. Those oils are relatively aseptic. They're good at not letting things live on them, and I think you get a better extraction putting those straight in the beer than you do if you do a tincture. With a lot of other spices, just to be on the safe side, a tincture is probably a good idea, especially in high proof alcohol, to make sure there's no baddies on there. But with lemon specifically and orange peel, if it's off of a fresh orange / lemon, then I don't tincture.
Now, what Peter's talking about there, so don't take your zester and zest the whole thing. If you've done it, you know that you get oils everywhere, and those oils everywhere are not going into your beer. You want them in the beer. The way that I kind of describe that is not a twist, but the bartender peel, where you take the knife and you just cut around the outside. Don't get the white part. The white part is the pith. The pith is very bitter. If you do get it, it's okay. Just keep in mind that you're having something very bitter in there, and maybe you take out some hops. Just nice big old strips of just the outside part, a gentle little twist on that, drop it in, and you are good to go.
KO Brewing, I'm getting low attenuations with using Voss and Lutra. Never do with any other yeast, and I'm using lots of Puro 2 and double the Y yeast nutrient. I am fermenting under 10 to 12 pounds of pressure. The pressure, could that be the problem? It could be.
Could be.
Yeah, we've gotten some Lutra being a weenie before when we pressure fermented it. I would say the biggest thing is if you're fermenting under pressure, you also have to temperature ramp. Really make sure that you're getting that temperature up to 95 plus. And if you temperature ramp, especially towards the end of fermentation, I think you can get you should be able to get full attenuation. If it goes down to like 70 to 75, that'll help it fall asleep.
Yeah. Quake is weird. Yeah, you need to have high temperatures fermenting. You don't need to, but it's better. If you overpitch quake, and that's like throwing one homebrew packet into your beer that is overpitching quake, and then you ferment it at a normal temperature, there's a chance they'll start so fast that it'll be like, hey, wait a minute, we ate everything in this general area, and then fall asleep. It happens when you overpitch yeast. Temperature ramp, and that's probably the best thing. Make sure that you're keeping the temperature high on that.
And blow on it.
And say a prayer. Les Paul Slayer. I got huge clove notes from Ardennes using 2 pounds of oats in the mash firm at 72. That can happen.
I would say we personally usually ferment Ardennes pretty low because we like a lot of the sweeter fruity notes that come off of it, and
I do.
Not the clove.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ferment low, it's easy to avoid the clove with Ardennes usually.
If you fermented Ardennes with most other Belgian yeast at that same temperature, there would be probably, and I say probably, it depends on a couple of other things, much less cloviness compared to the other Belgian strains. A lot more bubblegumminess coming out of it. Doesn't mean that it's completely all the way gone. And yeah, you can probably get it too, but you ferment wit beer in the same thing at that same temperature, you will probably have twice the amount of clovey flavor. But again, that's just kind of what the yeasts are meant to do. We like fermenting Ardennes cool and getting that nice bubblegummy fruity aspect from it. I absolutely love it. It reminds me a lot of like St. Bernardus. I love St. Bernardus. Yeah, right? You should always do what we tell you to, because we're right. Or make good beer. If you're making good beer, ignore us.
One of those things, yeah. We've made beer before, so you need to listen to us. All right, what else? Before we go into a couple more questions, I do want to quickly hit on other alternative ways to kind of formulate your yeast selection when it comes to making winter beers. Again, that SO4 British is kind of the standard because it's relatively neutral. That's your blank slate. That's going to be malt leaning. It'll push into some nice sugars that you'll add, so it'll kind of give you the flavor of those sugars. But the funky European yeasts, those ones are really, really fun to play with, and specifically I'm talking about Scottish and Irish ale. And then instead of being like the British yeast where they have like that heavy fruitiness. I don't know what to call it, just English fruitiness, which I find unattractive in winter beers. They have sharper, brighter, funkier fruitiness, and so I think they're a lot funner to use for winter warmers.
I also find a lot of the traditional British beers to be bready, especially if you get them too hot. And that breadiness, some people absolutely enjoy it. I personally don't.
It makes it hard to find that spicy balance, like because you want brightness and sweetness, but you want it to be like not full warm sweetness. You want it to be like distinct sweetness and distinct brightness.
Dark caramel sweetness, but not sugar caramel, because that makes sense. And for that, I mean, you're getting a little bit two different aspects with the Irish and the Scottish in there, but they are great things for this. I mean, the Irish, where you're getting a little bit of that high kind of green apple notes, and that can go in really well with some of the citrusy notes from citrus fruits, as well as some of the spices. You're getting some funk coming off of that, and that funk can also go amazingly well with spices. White pepper comes to mind actually right now. White pepper is one of those, it's an amazing thing, but it's so horsey and funky. Like, just to have that tiny little touch of it in there is super enhancing.
Speaking of endorsing our brewing styles, I'm Adam Chumbley. Since I have been mashing low and building flavor through malt profile, Genus style, that's what we like to do. I found mid-60s on my ale yeast has produced the cleanest, best-tasting beers. And he says Dieter too to something that Rev is using.
Rev said Dieter did that to me, and I think that he's...
Maybe on the cloviness?
No, not on the cloviness or stalling.
I don't know. Either way, yeah, I prefer... I've said this probably a million times now, but I definitely prefer that low mash temp and then just build flavor through either adding oats or adding certain malts that build my style. That way I'm not playing with the inconsistency of, 155, 155 mash temp and not knowing exactly where my enzymes are at. I like my enzymes to be consistent so that I know exactly what I'm doing when I'm changing my malts up.
Yeah. All right, back into the other one, Scottish. I believe Chumbley said something. He does his winter ales with Scottish yeast, and this is something that I think is awesome, especially if you're trying to go for the big malt bombs of winter beers. I think Scottish might be a little bit more favorable in a winter beer in a classic winter warmer type without spices, without other fruit in there, even though the fruit, the fig, the date, the orange, all of that would go really well with Scottish yeast. The good malt enhancingness of Scottish Jubilee. It is something to create something like Jubilee for me.
Jubes is fun. Scottish yeast is a really fun one too, because fermented warm, it can add a little bit of fruitiness while having a lot of the funk. But fermented cold, Scottish ale actually produces certain phenols that give you a perception of smoke. And so, and Scottish ale yeast can actually ferment really, really cold. It can go down to like 58 degrees. So if you ferment Scottish ale on the cold side with a big ass pitch, you'll get a relatively clean beer with just a fun, smoky kind of flavor to it, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, which can go really well with a lot of these beers in there.
Yeah.
So fermenting it warm for the fruitiness, enhancing the maltiness, like normal for fruitiness and maltiness is great. And if you drop it down a little bit, catch a little bit of that smoke, that should be awesome.
Drop it low. Each day, what kind of beer will be delicious? Hot. I mean, like mulled wine style. We already talked about the creaky thing.
Creek. Cascade Barrel House in Portland does this every year and is absolutely phenomenal. They turn their creek, which is basically a cherry lambic, into a spiced hot drink. They actually call it Glue Creek, like glue wine, which is pretty much what you're talking about. It's just the traditional way to say it. That phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I will say most sours, especially when you're adding the spices and the sugar along with it, are gonna go phenomenal hot and mulled.
Yeah.
go out and get some Lindemans.
You've got to have some level of acidity. I think that's why mulled wine works so well. You've got to have some level of sharpness or acidity. It can go. You can use a stout too, because stout has that roast acidity. But it's got to have something to kind of balance back with any spice that you're going to add. Regular beers without the spices and without some sort of acidity to pop on, and without the extra sugars or sweetness, if it's a drier beer, probably aren't going to taste good warm, especially not like in your crock pot warm. But if you've got some level of acidity, I think Creek's a really great example. It's also very similar to wine and how it feels. That's a really, really good way to do it. But if you don't have a Creek, try a stout, or somebody just recommended a Hefeweizen. I could see that working.
Yeah. Well, going into a couple of those other things, there's things you got to think about. Nobody likes a warm beer, and there's reasons. Well, that's not true. Most people don't like warm beer, and there's reasons for that, because when classic beer warms up, there are flavors that we just find unattractive. And that's not cask. I'm talking about like actual hot beer. Like, you leave it on the radiator while you're playing beer pong and come back to it and you're like, oh, that's gross. But there are some styles that go very well. The spices are going to be one thing that really jumps out when you warm spices on there, which is why something like a Hefeweizen or maybe a wit beer would work really well. That helps. But I wouldn't suggest a whole lot of funk. Like, don't do a Saison. I mean, do it. Try it. Let us know how it happens. But doing a high funk Saison, I think, might be the wrong way to go on there, because it's just going to exacerbate some flavors you don't want, like the horse blanket coming way too over the top from the pepper. I like the Hefeweizen idea. I mean, Wassail. Wassail is a light German beer that you dip hot coals into to heat up and drink, and it's actually very great. Is Wassail Hefe type? I don't know. I don't really actually remember that.
I think it's just like a...
I mean, we made it, and it was delicious. But if you're going to use something warm, I mean, really think about what...
It would be a hot rod.
It was a hot rod. Go watch the video. Yeah, you just got to think about what's going in. If you want something off the shelves that's really easy, what's available mostly all around, Leafman's. I think they call it Creek now, but it used to be called Cuvée Brut. Absolutely amazing. Leafman's Woutenbond, and it is pronounced Woutenbond, even though it looks like Gutenbond or something like that. Those
James
are both really
Woutenbond.
good. And then any of the Lindemans lambics, any of those are going to be amazing. And in fact, this will be incredible. Go get the Lindemans Pesche, because that's peach. Get some nutmeg, get some cinnamon in there, get some sugar going. Well, it's already pretty sweet, so you probably don't need that much sugar. And then add some bourbon to that sucker.
Ooh.
And you're going to have a spiced bourbon peach. And maybe even if you need to add some more sweetness, add honey.
And it'll only cost you $45.
It's so delicious. Sours work really well. Some of the stouts work really well. I could actually see Kentucky Breakfast Stout working pretty darn good for that.
Yeah, I would probably want to spice that one too.
Or add more coffee.
Yeah,
Maybe some cream, actually.
maybe.
I could see adding some cream into that one. So, yeah, they're all over in there. You just need to kind of, warm your beer up. See how your beer tastes warm, and then kind of decide where you need to go for spices.
Adam Chumbley, I fermented 60 at 67 last year with Scottish and added the rum-soaked figs and apricots. He says, by all accounts, amazing, and he's going to tweak it this year and send us some. I just have to say thank you for leading by example.
Yes. Everybody be like Adam. Send us your beer. The rum-soaked figs. Actually, talking about doing a hot beer, adding something in like rum-soaked figs and apricots, or rum-soaked cherries, or rum-soaked raisins to a hot... Okay, here's a great hot beer idea, actually. A quad.
Yeah.
Belgian quad.
Hot quads.
With rum-soaked raisins and figs. That will be amazing. Maybe some spices in there, too.
We happen to have a quad here. We should do a holiday festival where we do like a warm beer, like out of a crock pot kind of thing.
We should do a warm beer festival. I would be 100% down for that.
That'd be fun.
I just told... Precious Things does the glue wine, and he was talking about sour beer he has, and I'm like, dude, you have to. You have to do this. I will drink it all. Yeah, all right.
Wiser says, do it, Tim.
Wiser. Get on the other breweries. Get them together.
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Wiser. You're the organizer.
You're on it.
All right. What do we got? We got.
All right. Well, let's go into a couple of other yeast in here that we're talking about a little bit. One thing that Peter put down, don't go too big on the English fruitiness. If you want fruitiness coming out of a yeast, what I would personally suggest is a German strain. Get that Kolsch fruitiness coming out of it because it's going to blend so much better than the English fruitiness.
With all the spices, yep.
Oh, yeah. But the last one. This is a little bit different, and I think this is going into something different, and we're going to break away from the spice beers, come back to Cascadian Dark Ales, which I think a Cascadian Dark by itself is just a pretty good winter beer idea, especially for IPA drinkers.
I'm just going to keep calling it black IPA just to piss people off.
Spruce beers and things like that. Using American Ale 2 instead of Chico. Don't use Chico. It's not that great.
Yeah, the biggest reason that I put American Ale 2 on there, which is Independence and Yeast, is to counteract if you've got a recipe that's got Chico in it, 100% of the time. 100% of the time, get
Thank
rid
you
of
for
it.
calling Genus. You're live on the air. We sure do. We sell a lot of empty bottles. Yep.
So American
Yeah,
Ale
we
2
could
is going
do
to
that.
have
All right, guys, hang on one
little bit
second.
less
We are literally
fruitiness.
in the middle of their live stream, so I'm not joking when you're live on air right now. Oh, no, not at all. If you turn on our YouTube, I'm talking to you right in this moment. Hang on 1 second. Let me get back there and get out of this so we can do that. I will give you a warning. Every single Sunday in the morning, we are doing live stream. So calling
single
before
one.
we're open, you're going to get put on air. Just keep that in mind. All right.
So American Ale 2, which is Independence, is going to have a subtle fruitiness that actually goes really well with your spruce tips. Like a lot of better with a range of hops as well. Tell me, what breweries do you want for Winter Warmer Fest?
No, don't worry about it. All right, what kind of bottles?
Matt, just get all the breweries that are small, and then maybe one big brewery like Lumberbeard.
Depends on what you're ready. If you want the 12.
Daniel, working on it. I just finished moving, so I'm working on refilling my kegs. I'll send you some from with my brother when he visits. Nice. That's awesome.
Got plenty of 12 ounces. How many?
Send us beer. All right, so we got just a couple more minutes for questions. If you got any more questions, shoot them at us right now. If
12 or 22. Honestly, the
Revan's going to send us some Green Bank cidery. Nice. If not, we're probably going to work on wrapping this up pretty soon just so we can get open. But we'll give it a couple more minutes if you've got questions before we are skabouncing. Scroll up and see if I find anything else.
no bales. How many?
Les Paul Slayer. Use sugar and add citrus peel. Let it sit overnight and concentrate the oils.
2 cases, 12
Is that like just the citrus peels on the sugar? So you're making like flavored sugar?
manual entry. All right, hit me with
Adam Chumbley, I think we need to do legit live call-ins. That would be fun. I know CH Humber for Life has a way of doing that when he's like on his live stream. He can do either audio because he uses Discord as like his central hub for things. Favorite dry hop for cider?
Yep.
When I'm growing my own hops, I love Willamette, like fresh Willamette. If I'm buying hops, then Cryo Simcoe.
All right, expirations.
Live call-ins.
Code on back. And then zip.
Fastest turnaround for bottling a beer with Quake. That's a good question. The fastest we turned around a beer with Quake into a keg, including the carbonation time in a keg, was 3 days. I think if you're bottling, the conditioning time is going to be the limiting factor, but I think it's possible to probably have it ready in 7 days. It's really going to depend on the original gravity, though. We had one beer that we made with Quake that was our low-cal IPA, and from pitch to being ready to keg was less than a day. Gonna brew here soon. Gonna go for a smash. pound of cashmere to try.
Yep.
Cashmere sounds pretty fun.
All
We've
right.
used cashmere once.
So, all right, we're off.
Yeah, we're running out of questions here, so we're probably gonna
Well, did we talk about
start scooping it down a little bit.
don't use Chico?
We talked about don't use Chico. Chico it's bright and it's got like some weird, almost tinny kind of quality to it. Doesn't blend well with spices. Doesn't blend well with spruce. Using American ale, the subtle fruitiness waves a lot better into, especially that spruce beer. So
Yeah,
if
just
you're pretty much
spruce.
anytime that Chico's in a recipe, just use American too.
Just use American. Honestly, it's going to taste so much better. People need to back off of USO5 and Chico strain. I know it's cheap. I know it's readily available, but there's so much better yeast out there for everything.
If you haven't yet flipped us a thumbs up, you should do that right now. If you do, I will personally come to your house and give you a high five.
Adam, if you start doing live call-ins, we're just not going to answer the phone.
Do we have speakerphone on this
I
thing?
don't know. We should, though. Yeah, spruce beers. Spruce beers going, I mean, I know Peter probably talked about that a little bit, but that was an awesome winter type of beer.
We do have speakerphone.
Nice. If you're also doing a spruce beer and doing it darker, I don't know that I would go stout necessarily. I'd probably set it up to be something a little bit more like Schwarzbier, where it still has a nice, easy, highly drinkable or highly quaffable base beer that the spruce can go over, and backing off on a lot of your hops, which I'm sure we're covered, but, you know, I was talking, so.
Reverend KY, if you do a live call-in, can you base it on the Letterkenny system? I don't understand the reference. I've only watched
I've only seen that season like once, and all I really remember about it is All Beers Day. So we do that every day, and we normally would be doing that now, but I can't drink alcohol at the moment. Let's see. Yeah.
Salad Official. I brewed a beer with harvested quake, and it turned out a bit sour. Is there a way to determine if the yeast is infected with lacto, or if it's just a normal quake pH drop? Yeah, that's harder to do. So, not all quakes are, sour producing. They have a normal pH drop. It's a little bit more extreme, but they usually don't taste sour. So, it's probably an infection. Without tasting it myself, it's hard to say.
Also, going along with that, a lot of quakes are a blend of yeast and sometimes bacterias in there. So getting a harvested quake, unless it's something like Lutra, which is known to be a single strain because it was a single strain isolate from that, you don't quite know where the blend levels of these yeast are anymore, and it could produce something very different. It's also why it's a huge danger of pitching mixed firm dregs from a bottle, because you have no idea what levels everything is at when there's more than one yeast involved. So it could be something like that in your particular strain, the more tart yeast started to gain prevalence in the beginning maybe, or even in the end, or throughout the whole thing. And you didn't notice it in this beer, but when you repitch it, you have more of that particular yeast in the blend in there. So it takes off more and you're getting more of that going on.
Riv Rivera just did a split blonde, used SO5 in one and SO4 in the other. Story time. So when I was a fledgling home brewer, this is probably right around the time that I started the shop, maybe a little bit before, when I opened up the original iteration of this like 10 years ago or something. I actually did a ton of different beers side by side with specifically SO5 and SO4. And 100% of the time, SO4 tasted better.
I will agree with that.
I did it with a stout, IPA, like every single kind of beer that you can think of.
There's something about it, and I know I've gotten on my soapbox before about this. There's something about SO5 or Chico that I just really don't like. For me, unless it's ice cold, which personally is a problem, and you should not serve your beer ice cold. You are detrimenting your beer. Don't do it unless you're a really crappy brewer and want people to taste ice cold beer so they can't actually taste your beer and know that it's crappy. And I'm not saying any home brewer is, but maybe macros. So it tastes like warm Bud Light to me all the time. I can't get that out of my head, and I just don't like Chico for that reason. There's so many other better yeast out there. All right, we got on that soapbox a
We should
little
do
bit.
some more blind tasting videos.
We should. We really should.
KL Brewing, if you're adding spices / tinctures in a secondary corny keg, should you wait a while to bottle or even to even out our flavor on the keg? It can still even out in the bottle. There's going to always be some level of live yeast, and that's not going to be, it's not going to be too much different between going in the keg and going in the bottle. If you're on your primary fermenter and there's a lot of yeast in the keg, that might speed up the process or do something different, but the difference between a keg and a bottle is going to be not very big.
I will say, if you were talking about the mellowing or aging process, the coming together process, second day chili is always better than first day chili type of thing. Yeah, when you add your flavoring in, maybe leave it for a day or two so the flavor can fully spread throughout the whole beer. So it's an evenly flavored beer rather than, just one part of it has flavor. But if you're talking about the conditioning process, the mellowing process, it's going to do the same in keg or bottle. So, all right. Looks like we're out of questions on there. Earthbound again. Haven't homebrewed much since 2011. Getting back into it, and so much has changed. You're right and you're wrong. You are right. There is so much different that we are doing now from, earlier. Oh, there's Harry. We were doing from earlier brewing, but I'm going to tell you, most of that hasn't changed. This is knowledge that we knew from a long time ago that didn't matter for a minute, and it's coming back in. There's also new stuff being added, like understanding more about biotransformation and thiolization. Modified malts, more specialty malts out there. Don't get lost in the sea, man. Don't. Stick to your basics. Develop your good process. Let's get it going, because that's going to be the most delicious. All right, last question. C. Chapman Skyline. What do you guys think about using English yeast in a light beer like a cream ale? Yes, 100%, and it'll work better in a cream ale than American yeast, because that English yeast is going to add a little bit more fruitiness to it. It's going to leave a little bit more residual body to it, not be so clean and crispy and turn it into a light American beer. It's going to be a lot more creamier and better. SO4 in a cream ale and loved it. Yes, that's exactly, yes. SO4 would be phenomenal.
If you haven't hit the like button yet, do that, because if you don't, I'm going to be very, very mad, and Tim's going to go on a rampage.
We are going to purposely miss half the boxes on bingo card for the next 2 weeks if you don't hit the like button right now.
Other than that, thank you for watching. We do this literally every single Sunday. We've never missed a single one. So get used to it. Be here next Sunday. We will too, and we'll talk about, whatever you guys comment below the video.
Yeah, give us some topics. Give us some things you want to see, and Bugweiser about that, so he can send it to us. He'll filter through them better than us.
And we'll see you next Sunday. Did you hit the end button?
Maybe.